This is John Krantz with Consim Press, and this is going to be tutorial number 5. And believe it or not, we're going to be talking about combat, at least one potential type of combat that can take place in the Hunter. So hopefully you've seen the first few videos and learned about U-boat displays, setting up, selecting your patrol assignment, and checking for encounters. And we're actually going to pick up from the video number 4 we just shot on patrol and checking for encounters during a patrol. And where we left at the end of segment 4, we had basically just rolled while our U-boat, which I have I'm moving here, was entering the second patrol zone in the Atlantic, and we had rolled successfully on the Atlantic chart for a possible encounter. We had rolled a 3 with 2d6, and we had a ship, unescorted ship. There's no escort involved. So that's where we're going to be picking things up on this segment. But before I do so, I do want to do a little bit of cleanup from tutorial number 4. At the very end of that clip, I mentioned that there could be cases where you have to roll twice for encounters for a travel box if your engine is damaged. But I didn't give you the specific rules case number. So let me go ahead and make good on that and show you where that ruling is. So basically it's ruling 10.2.1. And again, basically if you're aborting your patrol, as an example where if you have one diesel engine that's out, you're going to be having to check or roll twice for possible encounters. And again, you're using your diesel engines when you're at the surface, which is what's happening when you're aborting your patrol and trying to get back to base. So I did not mention specifically the rule, which is basically one of your diesel engines would be out, as 10.21 stipulates. So now that we've made good on video tutorial number 4, let's go back to video tutorial number 5 and let's talk about this single ship encounter. So we're going to be following the rules for that, and again, the rules are quite clear. We can pick that up in terms of from the beginning of the combat section. So I'm going to be scrolling up quite a bit here, and again, section 9 has combat, but actually we can actually scroll up a little bit further because we have encounters. So basically we just had a patrol encounter that we came across. So let me scroll down just so you can see a little bit of that. And so section 8 is where we're going to start. So basically we've determined already that it's a single ship that has occurred with the patrol encounter, and what we need to do now is determine the ship size and ID for the single ship. So let's go ahead and do that, and to do that we're going to go back to our charts and tables. So I'm going to go back there now, and let me go ahead and find the proper chart that I need to use for that. So we're going to actually use the encounter chart, which is E1, and I'm going to try to scroll down here just a little bit and make this bigger. So what we're gonna do here is we have only one ship. We know that already because it was just a ship on the encounter chart. So we just need to determine the ship's size for one ship. That's all that we had rolled for in that encounter. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll 1d6 to determine the ship size, and I rolled a 5. And we can see here at the bottom, ship size 5 is a large freighter. Wonderful. So we know we have a large freighter now. Another thing we can do is we can see if the encounter is at day or at night. So let's go ahead and roll that now as well. So I'm going to go ahead and roll a single die. And I rolled a 3 for day. So let's go back here and then let's introduce the combat display mat. So what we have happening now is we're going to be using the combat display mat, which I've got situated here, and we're going to have one target. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here while I grab my large freighter marker. Alright, we're back. I have my large freighter marker, which I'm showing to you right here. And on the large freighter marker itself, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in again so you can see this a little bit better. We have a circled 3, 4 on that marker, and per the rules, that's the number of hits it would take to sink a large freighter, and it all depends on the amount of tonnage of the freighter. So there's a sort of a hint here we can see already in these spaces that if you're less than 10,000 tons as a large freighter, you would need only 3 damage points to sink it. But if you were equal to or greater than 10,000 tons as a large freighter, you would require 4 damage to be sunk. So what we have to do next is we now have to find out what specific target we have for the large freighter that's by itself. So let me go ahead and I'm going to go here to this chart. It's the T2 chart for large freighter. So you'll see here we have 100 choices from large freighters to roll for, and the designer Gregory Smith actually looked at historically what ships were actually sunk during the course of the war, and that is where these list of ship names come from. These were all sunk targets during the war. So what we need to do now is we need to roll 1d10 plus 1d10. The reason they're separated 1d10 each is because the first d10 is going to represent the tens place, and the second d10 will be the ones place. So we're going to need that colored, we're going to need two different colored die to distinguish between the tens and the ones. And in our case, we're going to use the black 10-sider as representing the tens place, and the white 10-sider as the ones place. So let's go ahead and roll the dice now. And I rolled a 6 and a 0. So that's 60. So what we have is Vancouver Island is the large freighter we've identified. It's 9,500 tons. So what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to go back to my combat mat, and since it's under 10,000 tons, that means it needs 3 damage to be sunk. Now what you can also do, since I know I'm going to be engaging this ship in combat. Combat is always voluntary, by the way, but there's no escorts involved. I definitely know I want to go after a large freighter, very attractive target. So I'm going to go back to the rules just for a moment to show you the log sheet of how we could actually log the ship we've identified that we're going to be entering. So I'm going to go to the rules here, and we have a little example of a log sheet if I scroll down here. And so here we have an example. So what we have here is a log sheet. We're in October of 40. We're doing British Isles. So what I could do here, there's several options. I could just denote the 9,500 tons just by itself, the number, no ship name whatsoever, just to say that's the one I'm going to be targeting and for combat. I give you some other options as well. For May 41 row, you'll see here I actually added a one letter in front of the weight of the ship. So capital T for tanker, small s for small freighter, and a capital L for large freighter. So basically this gives us more information about the ship that's targeted without actually having the name. What I recommend, however, is for a ship you know you're going to be targeting for sure, you can go ahead and enter it on the log sheet. So I think this example that I start around August of 41 row is the best example. So again, just picking up from where we were before, I would use a small s for small freighter, a large L, capital L for large freighter, or a T for tanker. Put the tonnage next to it, but then in the space or row above it, put the name of the ship itself. Because again, given the refit rules, etc., you should have space on your log sheet, especially since we're only writing down ships that we're going to be actually targeting. I'd probably hold off writing down ship names, etc., of ships that I might decide not to target or attack at all. That will happen typically with convoys. You might not attack all 4 ships in a convoy that you're closest to. You might only pick 1 or 2 targets, and typically you're just going to write those 1 or 2 names down. Now, I want to give you a final tip, which may help you, because you might be thinking to yourself, well, I really need to sort of write down on a piece of scratch paper before I enter this on a log sheet what I'm actually targeting, because I really don't know yet. So what my advice to you is for that is along the same lines of what we have here with the letters, a T or a S or a L. Write down what that number was you rolled for that chart. So if we go back to what we rolled, which was again a large freighter, you could write capital L for a large freighter and the number 60 next to it. So I could write L60 somewhere, and that would represent, okay, I could look this up. Large freighter 60 is the Vancouver Island 9500. So it's easy to reference if you want to just write it down on the side and not put it on your log sheet yet. Another option, especially if you're using our optional roster sheets, because we have additional targets for you, is another option is to write down the target roster you use. So instead of doing a capital L, you could say a T2. I used T2, which represents the large freighter, and it was T260. So off the T2 table, it was I rolled a 60. That gives you the same result. And again, the reason you might want to use T2 instead of just the letter L is because we do have optional large freighter. We have an additional 100 you can choose from, which I'm showing to you here, which is T7. So by writing down T2, that helps you. If you're not using any of the optional targets at all, just go with the letter L, and you'll be fine. So again, just a little tip there I wanted to provide to you as far as how to go about recording things on the log sheet. So going back again to the display mat, what we've got so far is we know we're going to have We're going to be attacking a large freighter. It's by itself, so it's a sole target. Notice I haven't placed a large freighter in the top of the target 1 box. I would recommend you actually place it into the holding space of how much damage it can absorb. So as it takes hits, literally as you take hits, you move it up on the track until voila, you hit this space, which means it's sunk. So it's a nice way to track how much damage is left that this freighter can take. But it's starting with 3 damage that it can take. Now I did roll for day or night, and I rolled day. So what I have an option to do now is I have an option to switch to night if I wish. It's not a sure thing, so if we look at the charts for that again, let me go to the encounter chart. So switching, it's at the bottom left, day or night, I roll a 1d6. I'd have to, if I roll one, I'm sorry, I rolled a, I take that back. Okay, we did the initial roll, which was 3 for day. So that's what we initially rolled, but then you notice here to the right, I have an option. You might want to switch to night. That's especially effective against ships with escort. You might want to do it at night, especially for a night surface attack. But here, if I wanted to switch to night, I could if I roll successfully a 1 through 4 on a d6. But look what happens if I roll a 5 or 6. I completely lose that lone target. And to be honest with you, since this target has no escort, and I have no immediate threat to me as the U-boat commandant, I'm going to go ahead and just keep it at day. I'm not going to switch tonight because I'm afraid I might roll a 5 or 6. I do not want to lose this target and end the encounter without having a chance to sink it. So I'm actually not going to switch to night. So that explains a little bit about the setup for an unescorted ship. Now let's talk a little bit about the most important rules we're covering here when it comes to unescorted combat. So I'm going to actually take you to a specific case number, which I think does an excellent job at explaining exactly what we're dealing with when we're doing unescorted combat. And that is section 9.4.2. I really recommend this section because it specifically talks about a lack of escort, and basically it explains to you it's great news for you that there's no escort. It's basically a lame duck target. And we've got some explanation here that says you don't have any type of an escort detection to worry about because no escorts are around. Also, for unescorted ships, you can do surface combat. The advantage of surface combat is very simple. It means you can use your deck guns. You can deploy your deck gun and fire up to 2 combat rounds for the first combat round. And that's a big advantage to you because you're also saving potentially your torpedoes. Another big example is you don't have to, when you're facing an unescorted target, you've basically got some time to set up your attack and actually execute your attack before you get done with that first full round. So you've got some benefits. Basically, you can start with either your forward torpedoes or an aft torpedo or using your deck guns. And you can even fire from that section, wait for the result, and then decide if you haven't sunk the ship yet, you can then decide, okay, I'm going to use my remaining weapons that are available to me. So the example spells it out very clearly as far as, and again, this is only against unescorted targets. That is, again, for example, if you're at the surface, that's when you can use your deck guns. So if you're at the surface, you might decide, I'm going to fire my deck guns first, my 2 rounds, see how I do with damage. If that ship hasn't sunk yet, you can then decide to use either your forward torpedoes or torpedoes in your forward torpedo tubes, or perhaps fire from your aft torpedo tube. But one thing that's very important to keep in mind is when you decide to use any type of whatever that munition is going to be, or that weapon system. So if you say I'm going to be firing from my forward torpedo tubes, you do have to decide how many torpedoes are firing. You can't just fire one at a time, see the result, and decide to fire off an additional one after that from the same location. You have to commit a complete salvo of torpedoes. And same for the deck guns. You must commit either 1 or 2 of your ammo rounds before you know the actual result. But the good news again for you against unescorted ships is you've got some time to see the end result for whatever type of weapon you're firing and whatever those rounds are an amount of torpedoes before you decide if you're going to use that next system against that against that unescorted vessel. So let's go ahead and see now how this combat will work. So we've covered the main rules, which again 9.4.2 really is the main rule to cover here. And one thing I do want to mention, which has come up some questions already in the rules, is when can you as a U-boat commandant really use surface combat or be at the surface? Because you've got to decide between surface and submerged. And again, against unescorted vessels, I'd almost highly recommend to you consider surface combat because you want to use your deck guns. It's a different story, however, if you've got ships under escort that you're trying to engage. If you have ships under escort, typically you will always be submerged, meaning the deck guns will never get a chance to be deployed because you're not at the surface. There's one exception to the rule. You can be at the surface against escorted targets, but only if you decide to do a night surface engagement. And that is covered here in the rules, just a little further down, 9.5. So this is the only type of surface combat against escorted ships. You have to do it at night. So if I rolled day like I did, I'd have to actually switch to night if it was an escorted vessel and I want to be at the surface. But that is the only way you can be at the surface against escorted ships. Otherwise, you're always going to be submerged. So if it's day and it's a convoy, for example, or if it's day with a ship with an escort, you're always going to be submerged. You have to be in night to have a chance to get to the surface. So I hope that explains that rule well. Let's go back to where we were now. Again, we're back here to our combat mat. So we've got the large freighter, 9,500 tons, that we're going to be targeting now. And again, I just mentioned to you, and this is where the interaction comes into play between the U-boat display and the combat mat, is we're going to decide what type of firing we're going to do now. So let's go to our combat display mat, and as I mentioned, we're at the surface, actually, well, I jumped the gun. I'm going to decide what range I'm going to be at, and I definitely want to be at close range. That's my highest likelihood to hit, so I'm going to go ahead and come in at close range during the day at an unescorted large freighter. That is my decision as far as this type of attack. Notice I have my incoming hits marker against my U-boat. I'm not really worried about this because there's no escorts on the scene. I just have this marker here in case I ever need it at some point. But for now, I think I'm relatively safe. So let's go ahead and I'm going to now decide how to carry out my attack. And I'm actually going to deploy my deck guns first. So here on the combat mat at the very bottom with the arrows pointing up, we have this swim lane for target 1, use torpedo or gun attack. I'm going to, again, it's an unescorted target, so I don't have to declare any other attacks yet, whether it's forward or aft, etc. I'm just going to declare using my deck guns first. So I've got 2 rounds. I'm sorry, I used too much there. I've got 1 marker that represents 2, or if I flip it over, I could have 2 1s. But basically, you have up to 2 rounds of ammo you can use up. So I just want this 1 marker. It has a number 2 on it. Those are my 2 ammo rounds. That's the maximum I can fire of my deck guns for this combat round. So we're going to go ahead and resolve this combat right now. Let's see what happens. So we're going to go to our fire chart here. And let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So we're at our U1 table for our U-boat, torpedo, or deck gun fire chart. There are some modifiers here that are listed. This is my first patrol, and I really don't see anything in here. I'm at short range, so basically if I look through all of these, I really don't have any modifiers whatsoever that I can apply. So I'm using my deck gun at close range, which means I need an 8 or less to hit using, so I'm rolling 2d6 and I'm just adding them together. So let's do our first combat round with our deck gun. So I'm going to roll 2d6 and I rolled a 6. Okay, that's a hit. And I mentioned I'm expending 2 combat rounds. So let's now roll again for our second deck gun fire. And I'm going to roll 2d6 again. And I rolled a 12. Obviously that's a miss. So I have 1 deck gun that hit. So what we do now is we skip to the U-boat U3 attack damage chart. And I don't have a 105 millimeter deck gun. I can show that to you. If I go back here to the U-boat display mat, I have 88 here. So that's not going to give me any modifier for that. So let's go back to our chart. So again, we're going to be straight up, and we have to roll 1d6 for damage under the deck gun. We used our deck gun. We got 1 hit. So let's roll 1d6. And I rolled a 3. A 3 is 1 damage, is the result on the large freighter. So let's show that now. So we just expended our ammo. So this is spent now. This would go completely off the board. So I would remove it off the mat, and it's obviously removed from the U-boat display as well. It is gone. So I would just take this away. I'll just set it aside down here. But the large freighter took 1 damage hit. So notice now I only need 2 hits to sink the large freighter. So per the rule I showed you in the rule book for unescorted targets, I can now choose another weapon system to fire with. And I am going to definitely focus on my 4 torpedoes. And I definitely want to sink the large freighter. I'm going to be somewhat conservative in my approach. I don't know if 2 torpedoes will be enough because of torpedo duds have to be rolled for. I'm going to be using 3 torpedoes. So I'm actually pulling off now. Off my U-boat display 3 torpedoes, and let's go ahead and set those up now here. So we're going to be using now and rolling for 3 torpedoes as our torpedo salvo at the large freighter target. So let's go ahead and roll to see what happens now. So we go up here back to the U-boat torpedo chart. Again, we're at close range. There are G7A. I don't see any modifiers again for close range. Looks like it's going to be straight up. So we're going to go ahead and roll 2d6 3 times, 1 for each torpedo. So let's see how the first torpedo does. I rolled a 4. 4 or less, I need 8 or less, that's a hit. So 1 just hit. Let's check our second torpedo. I rolled an 8. Perfect. Luckily there was no positive modifiers which would have hurt me a chance to hit. I rolled an 8 precisely, and it stayed that way, so that's my second hit on the target. And let's roll the last torpedo. I rolled a 4. 3 hits total. Wonderful result. Very happy about that. But guess what? We don't skip down to the attack damage chart right away like we did for the deck guns. Why? Because we've got torpedo duds we've got to deal with now. So that's what we're going to do right now. We've got basically, what time of the year are we at? We're 1940 October. So we're going to use the 3rd row down, 1940 July, December. I'm using G7A steam torpedoes. I have to roll 1d6 for each dice. So I have to roll 3 times, 1 for each torpedo, to see if they remain as actual hits that detonate on the target. So let's roll for our first torpedo that hit the target and see what the result is. I rolled a 6. Okay, that is a hit. That is a good result, because if I had rolled a 1 or a 2, it would be a dud. So good news, thumbs up. It was a 6. So we have 1 actual detonation. Let's roll for our second d6 and see if we can roll above a 1 or a 2. I rolled a 3. That's above a 1 and a 2 again. Perfect. That's the second detonation. And we've got our third and last torpedo that hit, a 5. Wonderful news. We've got 3 torpedoes. All 3 torpedoes, believe it or not, none were duds. Perfect detonation on all 3. And this is just a quick FYI. This is the printed chart that came with the game, and again we have a download. This was just our we had one other error on our chart that we've corrected. We said here if you have superior torpedoes, which is based on a random event result, you apply a -1 modifier. Well, you wouldn't want to apply a -1 modifier here, obviously, because that increases your chance for a dud, and that was not what we meant for superior torpedoes. That means they're less likely to be duds. So this modifier is actually a +1. And if you download this chart and table from the Consim Press website, you'll see this note says apply a +1 modifier if you have superior torpedoes resulting from that random event result. So I apologize for that minor error there, but again, common sense tells you superior torpedoes will not increase your likelihood for a dud. Well, guess what? This is great. We've got a large freighter that took 3 torpedo hits and none were duds. They all detonated. So we're going to now check the amount of damage, and we're going to roll 3 times on this attack damage chart with no modifier. So let's roll for the first torpedo. I rolled a 5, 4 or more, that's 1 damage point. Now I'm going to roll again for the second torpedo. A 3, that's 2 damage, that's 3 damage already, and just for the heck of it, the last die rolls a 6, it's 1 damage, 4 damage, total of 4 damage resulting, and you know what that means already. So basically I only needed 2 damage to sink that large freighter. So the great news is, well, first I expended all my torpedoes. They all were fired away. They were great, none were duds. Large freighter got sunk. It is down. So this guy is now, I'm going to play here. Yep, yeah, he's flipped over. He is in the bottom of the water. And what we want to do now is we can return to our roster sheet. This is something I want to mention. So if we go back to our rules, we want to record this sinking on our roster sheet. So let me scroll down there and show you how you would mark a sinking. It's very important that you do that because that means you've had a successful patrol for just any regular patrol assignment. So here under October, British Isles, I would have the 9,500 for the tonnage, the name of the ship above it, and you would circle, put a circle around that result. That 9,500 tons would have a circle around it because as this log sheet tells you, you always circle the tonnage value for ships you sink. And then of course you would total it here on the rightmost column. That's your total sunk for that patrol assignment. And notice I have a little letter S, or a letter S at the end of this example here. That means you had a successful patrol assignment, which typically happens when you sink at least one enemy ship. There is an exception if you're doing a special mission as your patrol assignment. Actually, success then depends on delivering the special Abwehr agent, etc., or the mines. So mine laying mission. So again, there is a special rule for special missions that determines success differently. But again, we're doing a British Isles without a special mission attached. So just by sinking that one ship at 9,500 tons, that gives us a successful patrol assignment. So that basically that covers everything for what we just did against the unescorted target. Now, I'll probably shoot another video tutorial because things can get quite nasty. If for any reason this ship was not sunk, and let's say I decided not to use my aft torpedo tube and do that process, I just want to mention this for now, and I'll dedicate this to a separate video tutorial. But it is not as automatic as it seems here with this type of combat. The reason I mention that is if you fail to sink whatever ships you're targeting that are unescorted, and your combat round is over, you now have an option to decide, do I want to attempt an additional round of combat? And if you decide to do that, you would go to let me go to the encounter chart to show you what happens there. You would go back to the encounter chart E1, and you would basically roll on this table right here. Let me zoom in so you can really see this. I really want you to see this table. You would roll on the additional round of combat table. And again, there's modifiers. I believe there's modifiers for the year. So 42, 43, it gets a little nastier because you have to subtract from the die roll result, meaning trouble awaits you. So if you don't sing those unescorted ships and you're looking for an additional combat round after you've gone through it and they're still there and you really want to sink them, it's not automatic. You've got to roll on this table first. You've got to roll on the additional round of combat. And if you roll aircraft, we'll cover those aircraft encounters separately. That's a bit of nastiness right there. If you roll an escort, that's a special bit of nastiness, especially because I was at short range. If you check the special rules, which we'll get to in a future clip, you have to roll an additional time and right away if you get an escort result for escort detection. So while it is wonderful and you might be smiling to get an unescorted target ship, if things don't go well, and you roll some torpedo duds and it just doesn't go down and you want to finish the job, problems can happen. You are going to tempt fate there a little bit, and it could become quite a risky situation. So again, I'll dedicate that to a separate video tutorial. So basically, we've done a quick introduction here. Using the U-boat combat mat, you've seen how I've placed the target marker of the large freighter, which we sunk. You've seen how we've used up these 2 ammo rounds, which we could fire off, and then the 3 torpedoes. It was a day attack at close range. I didn't have to worry about incoming hits. Obviously, we had no escort. It was unescorted, so we had no marker in the escort space. There was no air attack taking place, and we were not part of a wolf pack patrol assignment. So this entire area was left blank. So that is a quick introduction to a ship engagement against a unescorted target, and we were successful and just sunk a large freighter.